platform. Seeing Walzak, how y'all doing this morning? Joining me is the Detroit Lions' own Smoking Jeremy B. I have so many questions for Jeremy this morning because I am one of the few people that didn't disagree with the Lions draft. I actually really, if you watched our Wire to Wire draft special, I actually really like Jack Campbell. I think Jack Campbell is a perfect fit inside, and he's a Detroit Lions guy, and we'll talk about that. I think Jahmyr Gibbs was severely overdrafted, especially that they had DeAndre Swift, they signed David Montgomery. I think it was an overdraft, but if they're looking for him to be the replacement for all those touchdowns that were lost, that were had last year, and they want him to be that cheap replacement at running back without signing a big name guy, and that's their guy, I can't argue with that. So, Jeremy, before we get started, before we kind of go into any other team or who had the best draft, you being the guest, being a Lions guy, why don't you start us off with how you think the Detroit Lions did and put us in your perspective on how you viewed it?
I think it was a solid draft. I think Jahmyr Gibbs was a replacement for Swift because Swift has a problem with staying on the field. And that is why he'd been on the trade block for 2 weeks prior to the draft. Congratulations, because UGA North, also known as the Philadelphia Eagles, got him in a trade with us. And you really didn't give up a lot. You gave up a Happy Meal and an open can of Pringles. You moved us up 30 spots in the 7th round and gave up a 2 years into the future 4th rounder for him. So I had to say that about the UGA North because you guys have drafted so many Georgia players the last 2 years. You practically are Georgia North.
Georgia and Alabama. Alabama on offense, Georgia on defense.
And
listen, I can't argue. I'm happy that they're doing that. Like, if you're gonna pick 2 spots to draft all your players from, why not those 2?
And us, it was Alabama and Iowa.
Listen, you guys are an Iowa factory, bro.
Yeah.
The Hawkinson draft. But I kind of put me in perspective and just let me know the Jahmyr Gibbs thing. Like, I'm sure that you're a very optimistic Lions fan, so I kind of want to hear it from a Lions fan's perspective.
Well, was I upset at first? Yes, because there was some better defensive talent on the board at the time. But at the same time, I got it because I knew that we were moving on from Swift. Okay. When he didn't sign his extension, and we didn't extend him, and this was going into his contract year, I had a feeling that he would either be traded at the draft or by the deadline. And by drafting Gibbs, that accelerated that trade process.
Okay. Hey, listen, I have no issue with the fact that they're replacing DeAndre Swift. I drafted him on a lot of my fantasy teams last year, and he didn't play a lot. Like, he was hurt or he was questionable each week. And I think what the Philadelphia Eagles did by getting him is they made sure he wasn't the every down back. It's him, Rashad Penny. You got a couple running backs that are in and out of the lineup, mixed with Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott. They'll have 4 running backs, and they'll use a full running back by committee to try to keep him fresh. I think when Swift is on the field, he's a top 10 running back in football.
Absolutely. I am not denying his talent at all. But you said the key words, when he's on the field. Every time he's had more than 17 touches, he gets injured that week or the following week. Yeah. So that is what I've seen in his career the entire time. When he had his breakout game against the Miami Dolphins his rookie year, he went down for 2 weeks the following week. Then he's missed 3 to 5 weeks every week since. So, and he wasn't a Brad Holmes pick.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I love what the Lions are doing as a whole. Like I told you, I'm a Jack Campbell guy. I did find it very interesting that you guys drafted Brian Branch. I love Brian Branch.
Oh, top safety in the draft. I loved it.
I agree, but my question would be, isn't that what CJ Gardner-Johnson was signed to do?
I think it's because we really didn't have a lot of depth behind Sutton and Mosley that was good slot depth, and we're going to mix that in. And plus, we run more of a 4-2-5 now than a 3-4 or even a 4-3. So we're going to end up with CJ GJ and Brian Branch on the field in the nickel and dime slots. at the same time, which is going to keep our bum players like Will Harris, who's more of a locker room guy and a mentor because he's been with the team for a while, which he's got to look over his shoulder because even in our UDFAs, we signed Brandon Joseph, another top 5 safety that somehow went undrafted, which is crazy when you consider the Seahawks safety problems and the Packers safety problems.
Philadelphia Eagles safety problems. We have no starting safeties. We drafted one in the 3rd round.
I didn't want to say that right there, but but he wasn't a Georgia or Alabama guy, so I get why they didn't draft him.
I will say this. I love what the Eagles did, and I kind of felt weird what they did in the cornerback position. Like, they already have Slay and Bradbury locked up for 3 years. You have Avonte Maddox, who's one of the top slot guys in football. You signed Greedy Williams in the offseason. That's 4 corners. You brought in Keely Ringo, and they traded up to get Keely Ringo in the 4th round. He was slipping. And then after the draft, the undrafted free agent, they signed Eli Ricks, another kid from Alabama, another really he was LSU transfer. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
Eli Ricks was an absolute stud at LSU, projected to be a 1st-round draft pick. Went to Alabama, had a very off year, few injuries, and then all of a sudden,
he's still a great talent.
Not drafted.
Right. You can also say the same thing about the kid out of UAB that the Lions picked up in UDFA, that Starling the 5th.
Yeah.
He's a good talent. He was slated to be a 2nd or 3rd rounder and went undrafted. You guys picked up another sneaky good linebacker from out of Michigan State, Ben Van Sumeren, who's kind of a beast. He's actually from where I lived the last 14 years in the Bay City area. I was good friends with his older brother, and God rest his soul, he passed away last year. So, and they both were big Lions fans, so I was hoping we were going to pick him up. So kudos to you guys to get him. But we did pick up another Saginaw area native, Trevor Nowaski in UDFA, and he is actually got a very high RAS. He was very sneaky. He was Defensive Player of the Year in the GLIAC for Division III. So that's another sneaky good player that we got. He's quick. He's 4.5 speed, tall, good size, 6'4", 230, 240 pounds. I like that pickup too.
So the one thing, the one guy I watched him enough, but not clearly. So let me ask you a question. How familiar are you with Big Ten football?
Pretty familiar. I mean, I'm a big Michigan fan, so I watch a lot of Big Ten.
I would love you to kind of give me your take on Sidney Brown, the safety out of Illinois that the Eagles took. Because first of all, you don't watch a lot of Illinois football. Like, Illinois has never been a powerhouse football team. I watch them when Penn State plays them, but like, other than that, I don't watch a ton. So the things I got to watch with him was mainly on tape. And he reminds me a lot of Hufanga from the 49ers. I'm not saying he's going to be Hufanga. Hufanga is top safety in the league, probably. But what was your take on Sidney Brown from Illinois?
Sidney Brown, it was a kind of a Kirby Joseph light with a little better tackling skills. He doesn't whiff on tackles as much.
Okay.
He is an in-air ball defender, but he doesn't get as many INTs. So he's a ball hawk, but he hasn't got the hand skills like Kirby Joseph had, because Kirby Joseph switched from wide receiver to safety. So that made a big difference in what helped his development as a safety.
I think it's interesting the Eagles picked him up in the 3rd round. He's going to compete for a starting.
He was supposed to be a 2nd rounder, so it's a great pick. I mean, he was supposed to be a late 2nd, early 3rd. You guys got him in the 3rd. It's a good pick. I like the guy we traded up for, who kind of went under the radar, but he had a great East-West Shrine game, that Broderick Martin, the DT.
Yeah.
You put him next to Aleem McNeil, but if you actually look at his JUCO numbers at North Alabama when he was in JUCO, he played D-end at that size. He's actually quicker than he shows. It's just he went to Western Kentucky, who's more of a 3-4 defense, and they needed a big guy in the middle, so they moved him to the nose tackle position. That was the only year he ever played nose tackle.
You want to know who my favorite draft pick the Detroit Lions picked up this year?
Hendon Hooker.
I got him going at 12 before the draft started, and you got him in the 3rd round.
Yeah, it was crazy value.
I think he's the 3rd best quarterback in this draft, pushing to be the 2nd behind CJ Stroud. if he didn't tear his ACL, he would have been a top 10 pick, and there's no way you take Anthony Richardson over him at 3.
Right.
Now, I guess the concern with the ACL is obviously there, and that's okay. But
he doesn't have to play this year.
No.
That's the big thing. He gets to sit there and learn behind Goff, who is a professional and doesn't mind helping guys behind him. You know, say what you want. He helped John Wolford get better after that AAF debacle that he was in. And I think this draft right now, it was a great draft for a lot of teams, but there was a lot of question marks. Like I said, the Packers and Seahawks, they had good drafts, but not great drafts because they didn't address their biggest needs in defense. You can look at the Vikings. They even need safety help because Harrison Smith isn't staying healthy anymore. And they didn't address that till UDFA. So, but they did get Andre Carter, who was supposed to be a second rounder. And they also got, who was it? There's another one they got who's a good player.
The Texans?
Yeah.
No, Anderson Jr.
Oh, no.
I'm talking about
UDFAs. Yeah, the Texans. It's Eagles, Texans, Chargers, Saints. For addressing their needs, I think that's the top 4 drafts right now. If you go to the 10, then you got it anywhere in that list. You can go Lions, Jets. Jets, had a very good draft too. Quite a few teams had a very good draft, but
I actually didn't like what the Chargers did at all.
You didn't?
No, I hated it, to be honest with you.
Wow.
What was the Chargers' biggest need?
I want to say O-line.
Wide receiver.
I want to say O-line. But they did need more targets
last year. I would say their interior, their run stuffing up the middle. They had Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa across the middle on the edges, but their D-line was weak. They didn't address that at all until the 6th round with a guy that might not make the roster. Taking Quentin Johnson, who most people has their number 2 or number 3 wide receiver on the board, when you have Keenan Allen and you have Mike Williams signed to that extension. You also have Joshua Palmer, who was drafted in the 3rd round from Tennessee just a few years ago. I think they're stacked at wide receiver, and to take that with so many good players on the board, that wouldn't have been my pick. The 2nd round, I really liked their pick when they went with Tully.
Yes.
I can't pronounce the guy's last name. I think it's Tuliaco.
Yeah, I say Tuli Simone is what I always say because I can't say it.
I actually like that pick.
That was a great pick. And he can play interior.
He's that tackle, though. He's an inside or outside linebacker.
He at over 280 pounds. He's played both positions at USC. He's played D end and D tackle, and he is strong enough with 22 reps to play that interior.
I think he plays the 3 end D end for them.
Yeah, I think he will too, in a rotational matter because they still got Bosa and Mack.
Well, Bosa and Mack, if you noticed last year, they lined them both up, and they were playing a 5 down front. They were lining essentially they were playing like a 5-2 with Bosa and Mack being the outside linebackers because they had such issues stopping the run. That's why they were playing like a 5-2 style. They don't really have linebackers.
Where they picked
constantly moved the safety, their best player, up in the box. Please.
Who do you feel like was other than Jahmyr Gibbs? Who do you think was the biggest reach in the 1st round? For me, it was Will McDonald.
It's funny. Will McDonald's probably one of them, but for me, it's Anthony Richardson. And I hate. Look, I've been very critical of this kid, and I don't want to be because, I don't think there's anything he did wrong. Like, he's a good kid, answers everything in the interviews well, hard worker. Like, there's nothing that showed me that he's not a good human being, right? But I don't want to be critical of a kid that I had a 3rd or 4th round grade on. I watched him play in college last year, and this is like one of those typical guys that you see shoot up through the combine, having an amazing combine, and they fall in love with his potential and not what he is. What is his absolute ceiling? Anthony Richardson. What's his absolute ceiling?
I mean, at his best, I'm going to say Cam Newton.
And that's what a lot of people, I just don't ever think he'll have the arm.
But I don't know if he'll make it. You said it. He doesn't have Cam when he came out had way better accuracy than what Anthony Richardson AR-15 has, and that's something you can't teach in a year.
You watched Cam play at Auburn, right? Like you watched him. He was a Heisman Trophy winner at Auburn.
Right.
He completed 70% of his passes at Auburn. Anthony Richardson completed 53% of his passes. Use that as a comp And like his absolute ceiling, you know, the player he most reminds me of that he could turn into, and this is 3 years down the road, and this is if he does everything right, is Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
And I don't think he'll be Jalen Hurts tomorrow, right?
No.
I think it'll be 3 years before he turns into what Jalen Hurts was. Not last year, but the year prior, the 9-8 season. I think he's an absolute project. There's no way I'm using the number 4 pick there. And I feel bad for Colts fans that think they said he's going to start right away. He's going to learn by playing. I feel bad for Colts fans because that team's ready to win, and they're not going to win they've had a quarterback issue now since Andrew Luck retired. They went from Andrew Luck to Jacoby Brissett. They jumped off Jacoby Brissett train and got old man Rivers, Philip Rivers to Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan to Sam Ellinger for a couple games last year. And now they're going to hand the keys of the franchise over to Anthony Richardson.
I think they may sit Richardson for a while and let Minshew start.
He said yesterday he's going to start the season.
Oh, my God. I think that's a crucial mistake to his development. I think he needs to sit for at least a half a season, if not 2 seasons.
No, I completely agree with you.
Okay. I mean, that's why I like where Hendon Hooker comes in, because he's not going to be fully healthy at least to the start of the season. So the most he'll do is be on the sidelines and hold a clipboard.
That's how you learn. And I think Jared Goff is really reinvigorated his career in Detroit. I think that they've done a great job, and I feel bad for the situation that's happening in Detroit with Jamison Williams, and Quentin Cephas was involved in that, I believe.
Well, Quentin Cephas and CJ Moore actually bet on the NFL games. That's why they got suspended and cut. Yeah, they were cut from the team.
Yeah.
So, and I doubt anybody's going to pick them up this offseason because they're all either 5th or 6th people on a depth chart in any other team.
Yeah, but I thought Quentin Cephas was a decent wide receiver.
He is. He's one of the best route runners we had. Him and Amon-Ra, when they were on the field, it was special that rookie season for Amon-Ra.
Jamison Williams bet on college, right? That's why.
That's why he only got 6 games, and he did it on NFL property, which is technically their time. So that it is what it is. But you know, when you got 8 staffers who get fired because that's why the investigation happened in the first place, betting on the college stuff. That type of leadership, when they're player personnel and player assistants, when young impressionable minds see that, they're like, well, it's okay to do that because it's not NFL.
I guess I don't think it's okay for what they did. I think that what they end up doing was, you make millions of dollars. Like, I don't know what you're trying to earn on the side, especially a first-round draft pick like James Williams.
Right. But you know what I'm saying? When the leadership sees it, he's like, oh, it must be okay. And that's why they got fired and he got the week suspension, the 6-week suspension.
I think that kid's a stud. And I think you guys need to tread water until he comes back, because I think Jamison Williams with Amon-Ra St. Brown gives you guys like a top 10 duo in football.
Well, I think that's why we drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. I think it's more of a reaction to Jamison being out 6 weeks, Swift not being able to stay healthy because he's almost as electric. You know what I'm saying, when he's on the field.
Yeah.
With Gibbs, he has that speed factor where he's faster than Swift. So we can actually move him to the slot and use David Montgomery primarily as the running back role, which is going to give the speed factor to the receiving core, because Gibbs is a very good receiving back. And he can play the slot as well as receive out of the backfield.
I've always called Jahmyr Gibbs Najee Harris light. I'm not a fan of him. I thought he was the 4th or 5th best running back in this class. But if he's a Detroit Lions guy, he's a Detroit Lions guy. Like Jamal Williams didn't fit in Green Bay, but he was a Detroit Lions guy. Talk about a leader, talk about a guy left his heart on the field every game, and I understand that. And if that's your guy, that's your guy. I don't hate what the Lions did, because if you just flip-flop their draft picks, right? If you take 12 and 18 and turn that into Brian Branch at 18 and Hendon Hooker at 12, and then you put Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell in the 2nd round, no one's complaining at all about the value that you got.
Right.
So I'm okay with how it turned out. Now, I want to talk about a team that got a lot of value, and I'll talk about the Philadelphia Eagles for a minute.
Absolutely.
At the 9th overall pick, did you get Jalen Carter is an absolute steal for him. But what I want to address more than that, and the part that kind of gets me even more excited about it, is you get him around his old college teammates. And the first name he mentioned when he was called was Nakobe Dean. He goes, well,
Hmm.
he was the leader of that Georgia defense. He was the leader. We all looked up to him. He was the guy. Now, Nakobe Dean has done nothing but do and say the right things in Philadelphia since he's been there. He basically almost redshirted, played special teams his whole rookie year behind TJ Edwards. The Eagles didn't resign TJ Edwards or Kazir White because they knew Nakobe Dean would be stepping into that role to be the starting middle linebacker. So you have Jordan Davis, who almost redshirted last year, Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith, who we'll get into in a minute, and Jalen Carter. And then you add Keely Ringo, who is looked at as one of the leaders in that locker room. So you have 6 starting Georgia Bulldogs on that 21 national championship team, which was one of the best defensive teams I've ever seen in college football history.
Hmm.
So I think it's not just the Jalen Carter pick. A lot of people are like the off-field issues and issues that he's had surrounding the team. That's not what turned me on to the pick. It turned me on to the pick that the fact that they have so many of his old teammates on the team that will help that out a ton. What are your thoughts on Jalen Carter?
I think he's a generational talent. I think he's going to be great. Um, it was a great pickup by you guys. The only thing I didn't understand, because I don't think that the Bears were picking him, the swap of picks.
I'll tell
It,
you what that was from an Eagles perspective. Like, you know how you're very tuned into Lions?
hmm
The Bears were debating on selling that pick to picks 12 or pick 13 for Detroit was actually interested in that pick with Chicago. So Philadelphia called them like, listen, what can we do as a sweetener to move up to 9 so you don't sell the pick to somebody else? Chicago was looking at moving down on that pick. They were definitely going to take an offensive lineman to protect Justin Fields, and they thought they can get that offensive lineman at 10. They were worried about getting him at 12, 13, or 14. So the reason that the Eagles gave up that 4th round pick to move up one slot was just to defend other teams from moving up and taking Chicago's pick.
Okay, that makes perfect sense now. But at the time when I'm watching, I was like, man, I don't see. There's not a big difference in the cap room money
Yep.
or anything like that, because 6 through 10, it's basically the same pay.
Yep.
A couple 100,000 difference, and 1 through 5 is the same pretty much, other than 1. I mean, 2 through 5 is the same, and 1 is the one that gets the big money overall. So,
Jeremy, I'm going to end the stream real quick and then restart it. We're having a huge issue with the chat overlay. There's no comments that are popping up, and I kind of want to make this more interactive. So I'm going to end the
absolutely.
stream and I'm going to restart it real quick, guys. If you guys are listening, please jump right back in. I just want to get the chat working.